In the annals of history, few names carry such a brutal paradox. A man once hailed as the savior of France, cheered by millions, trusted like a father, would one day be remembered as a betrayer, accused of selling his nation's soul. How does a hero become a traitor? This is the story of Philippe Pétain. Born in 1856 to a modest family, Pétain rose through the ranks not with charisma, but with discipline, calculation, and a sharp military mind. In World War I, when France bled in the trenches, it was Pétain who refused to surrender at Verdun, a battle so savage it claimed over 300,000 lives. He became a symbol of endurance, a national savior. France believed it had found its rock, its guardian against chaos. Verdun, 10 months of slaughter, a living hell. Soldiers whispered, "On n'y passe pas." They shall not pass. And under Pétain's leadership, the Germans did not. He was hailed as the Lion of Verdun, the protector of France. In the war's aftermath, monuments bore his name. Streets were christened after him. To the French people, Philippe Pétain was not merely a general, he was hope incarnate. But history is cruel. When World War II erupted, France crumbled in just 6 weeks under Hitler's blitzkrieg. And in the hour of desperation, the nation turned once more to its old hero. At 84 years old, Marshal Pétain was made leader. Yet instead of resistance, he chose surrender. He signed an armistice. Half of France was handed to Nazi occupation. The other half, the so-called Free Zone, became Vichy France, a puppet state under his command. Pétain justified his decision as protection, but the truth was darker. Under his rule, French police collaborate in rounding up over 75,000 Jews, men, women, children, most of whom never returned. The Marshal of Verdun, once savior of his people, now stood hand in hand with their occupier. To many, his name no longer spoke of glory, but betrayal. When the war ended, France rejoiced in liberation, but for Philippe Pétain, there was no redemption. In 1945, he was put on trial for treason. The nation he once saved now condemned him to death. His sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment, a mercy granted only because of his advanced age. He died in 1951, not as a hero, but as an outcast, his legacy forever fractured. Philippe Pétain's life is a warning etched into history's stone. Greatness can crumble and heroes can fall. He reminds us that the line between protector and betrayer is as thin as fear, as fragile as pride. But he also leaves us with a question that echoes across generations. What would we choose in the face of impossible odds? Resistance or surrender? The story of Pétain is not just the tale of one man's fall, but of a nation's struggle to hold fast to its. The aura surrounding Pétain was also carefully shaped by the media and political figures who sought to present him as the protector of the French people. Portraits of him in uniform, cap slightly tilted, gaze resolute and calm, appeared in newspapers and posters, reinforcing the image of a leader whose wisdom and experience were unmatched. Every public appearance, every statement, further solidified his heroic status, and the collective memory of the nation began to intertwine the man with the idea of France itself. Citizens saw in Pétain a reassurance that their country could withstand catastrophe, that even in the darkest hours, there was a figure capable of navigating the storm with unwavering judgment. Yet, beyond the public adulation, Pétain's personal discipline and meticulous approach to military command remained his defining characteristics. His strategies at Verdun were not merely acts of intuition. They were the result of years of careful study, understanding of logistics, and a profound awareness of human endurance. He balanced the ruthlessness of necessity with compassion, recognizing that victory required not only tactical acumen, but the preservation of the men who would carry that victory forward. In doing so, he became a rare figure in history, a leader whose genius was measured not only in triumphs, but in the lives he sought to protect amidst unprecedented suffering. By the end of World War I, Philippe Pétain's rise was complete. From the quiet streets of his childhood to the ravaged fields of Verdun, he had forged a legacy of heroism that would endure in French memory for decades. He was celebrated not only as a military strategist, but as a guardian of his nation's soul, a man whose name inspired pride and hope in a world scarred by war. The Lion of Verdun, as he was called, had become more than a general. He had become a symbol of resilience, endurance, and the complex weight of leadership in times of unimaginable crisis. Philippe Pétain's journey to prominence began in the quiet confines of a modest family home. Far from the grandeur of Parisian society, where the values of discipline, respect, and duty were instilled in him from a young age. The early years of his life were unremarkable to the outside world, yet they shaped the foundation of a man who would later be celebrated as the embodiment of French resilience. Pétain's early military career was marked by a relentless pursuit of excellence, a tireless dedication to mastering strategy, and a careful observation of both men and battlefield dynamics. He did not seek attention, nor did he crave public acclaim. His focus remained on the precision and order that would later define his command style. By the outbreak of the First World War, he had risen steadily through the ranks, earning the trust and respect of peers and superiors alike. His reputation, built upon meticulous planning and unwavering calm under pressure. When the horrors of Verdun descended upon France in 1916, Pétain found himself at the center of a crucible that would forge his place in history. The battle, one of the bloodiest in modern warfare, became synonymous with unimaginable suffering. Thousands of men trapped in a labyrinth of trenches, mud that swallowed equipment and soldiers alike, and relentless artillery fire that reduced the landscape to a shattered wasteland. Amid this chaos, Pétain's presence was steady and reassuring. He reorganized defensive positions with methodical efficiency, ensuring that troops were rotated to preserve their strength while the artillery barrage rained down with merciless intensity. His insistence on maintaining morale, providing food and rest whenever possible, and listening to the concerns of the men earned him the moniker Papa Pétain. Among soldiers who had endured weeks without reprieve, the French people, far from the front lines, received word of his leadership and perseverance through letters, newspapers, and word of mouth. His stories of his strategic genius and his humanity toward the soldiers reached every corner of the nation, creating a growing image of a man who not only commanded but cared, who understood the suffering of ordinary soldiers and the stakes of their survival. For a country exhausted by the prolonged conflict, Pétain represented stability and hope, a tangible symbol of endurance amid devastation. His approach to leadership, which combined tactical brilliance with deep empathy for the men under his command, set him apart from contemporaries who prioritized glory over the welfare of troops. As the months of the Verdun campaign dragged on, Pétain's decisions became increasingly decisive in shaping the outcome of the battle. He introduced systematic supply lines to ensure that the front lines remained adequately provisioned, defying the chaos and disarray that threatened to collapse the French defenses. Each choice he made reflected careful calculation: how to counter German offensives, how to rotate weary units without exposing weaknesses, and how to inspire confidence in a force tested beyond human limits. Soldiers who once despaired now fought with renewed determination, inspired by a leader who not only understood strategy but also embodied the resilience he demanded. In this environment, his reputation grew beyond the battlefield, entering the consciousness of a nation desperate for a hero. By the time Verdun concluded, the cost of victory was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of lives had been lost. Entire landscapes had been obliterated, and the psychological toll on the survivors was immeasurable. Yet, in the midst of this devastation, Pétain emerged as a figure of national significance. The French government recognized his contributions, and the people's adoration reached unprecedented levels. Streets were named in his honor, monuments erected, and public ceremonies celebrated his role in defending the nation. He became more than a general. He became the personification of France's endurance, a living testament to courage under fire and steadfast dedication to duty. The collapse of France in 1940 came with a speed and ferocity that few could have imagined, and even fewer were prepared to withstand. The German blitzkrieg tore through the nation, cities falling in days, armies surrendering in hours, and the proud tricolor flag of France lowered under the relentless advance of tanks and planes. In the midst of this unprecedented defeat, an aging Philippe Pétain was called upon once more. A figure who had once symbolized hope and resilience, now tasked with confronting a reality that defied hope. At 84, he was no longer the vigorous marshal of Verdun, but a man whose authority and judgment would be tested not by strategy alone, but by moral and political choices that would echo for generations. The nation, humiliated and weary, looked to him as the last vestige of leadership, capable of navigating the storm, believing that his experience and reputation could preserve some measure of dignity amidst total defeat. When Pétain assumed power as chief of the French state, the armistice with Germany was his first and most consequential act. He chose surrender over resistance, a decision justified by his claim to protect a shattered nation from further devastation. Half of France was occupied by Nazi forces, while the so-called Free Zone was administered under his authority from Vichy. Initially, the population saw this as a pragmatic choice. a temporary compromise intended to spare lives and infrastructure. Yet, beneath the veneer of protection, the machinery of collaboration began to take shape, and Pétain's once heroic name became entwined with policies that betrayed the very principles he had once defended. The transition from national savior to collaborator was gradual, measured, and calculated. Pétain established a regime that emphasized order and hierarchy, presenting it as a stabilizing force in a country that had known only chaos and humiliation. Yet, within the framework of Vichy France, obedience to the German occupiers became a central tenet, and policies emerged that directly facilitated the oppression of French citizens and the systematic persecution of Jews. French police, under the authority of Pétain's government, participated in the identification, rounding up, and deportation of tens of thousands of Jewish men, women, and children. Each decree, each administrative action, moved the nation further from the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity that had once defined it, and into complicity with the machinery of the Third Reich. Public perception of Pétain's actions was complex. Some viewed him as a cautious pragmatist, a man making impossible decisions in an era dominated by forces beyond any individual's control. Others saw betrayal, the moral collapse of a man who had once inspired courage, now commanding submission. His collaboration was not merely symbolic, it was tangible, with policies that directly contributed to suffering and death. The moral compromise became increasingly visible as French institutions willingly carried out German directives, and as the armistice that promised protection instead became a mechanism of oppression. Citizens who had once cheered for Pétain now whispered doubts, the reverence of earlier years giving way to fear, uncertainty, and anger. The Vichy government's propaganda machinery worked tirelessly to justify these choices, painting Pétain as the guardian of France, preserving the nation from total annihilation. Portraits of him appeared in official publications, emphasizing his wisdom, age, and calm demeanor, as if the solemnity of his appearance could mask the moral consequences of his policies. Yet no image, no carefully crafted statement could obscure the reality. The French state, under his authority, was complicit in atrocities, a stark reversal from the image of protector and hero that had defined him decades earlier. International observers watched with horror as France, once a beacon of resistance and republican ideals, became a cautionary tale of submission under tyranny. As the war continued, Pétain's authority was increasingly constrained by the occupying forces, yet he retained the formal title of head of state, and with it, a symbolic responsibility for the actions of his government. Decisions that might have seemed tactical or protective in isolation took on a broader significance when measured against the moral weight of history. Each decree, each collaborationist act, widened the gap between the man of Verdun and the leader of Vichy until the contrast became undeniable. The lion who had inspired endurance now presided over a regime that facilitated oppression and betrayed the citizens he had once vowed to defend. When the Allied forces liberated France in 1944, the nation emerged from years of occupation with a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and moral reckoning. Streets once shadowed by fear now thrummed with celebration. Yet the joyous liberation carried a profound need for accountability. Philippe Pétain, the man who had been elevated to near mythical status for his heroism at Verdun, now faced the weight of history as a symbol of collaboration and betrayal. The contrast was stark and unforgiving. The same man whose name had inspired courage now embodied the moral failure of an entire regime. The nation demanded justice, and for Pétain, there would be no leniency from the people whose faith he had once commanded. The trial commenced in 1945, set against the somber backdrop of a country still healing from occupation and war. Courtroom sketches and photographs capture the frail figure of Pétain, hunched in age, standing before judges and citizens alike, a stark reminder of the passage of time and the gravity of his choices. Charges of treason, high collaboration, and complicity in the deportation of Jews were laid bare. Each detail meticulously documented, each action weighed against the moral and legal standards of the nation. Witnesses recounted the policies enacted under his authority, the decisions that had facilitated the machinery of the Holocaust, and the administrative mechanisms that had enabled oppression. Every testimony reinforced the dissonance between the image of the Lion of Verdun and the head of a puppet state. Public attention was intense. The nation divided between admiration for past heroism and outrage at wartime conduct. Newspapers and radio broadcasts followed each day of proceedings, chronicling not only the legal arguments, but the symbolic weight of the trial itself. For many, the courtroom became a theater of reckoning, a place where history could confront the complexities of loyalty, duty, and moral responsibility. Observers debated whether Pétain's advanced age and past service should temper judgment, or whether the magnitude of his betrayal rendered all excuses moot. The tension reflected a broader struggle within France, the need to reconcile national pride with the shame of collaboration, the desire to honor resilience without ignoring complicity. Pétain himself presented a calm, measured demeanor, invoking his past service and insisting that his decisions during the occupation had been guided by the intention to protect France from further destruction. He argued that surrender had been a pragmatic choice, meant to preserve lives and maintain some form of national sovereignty under impossible circumstances. Yet, his words did little to assuage the weight of evidence, and for the citizens who had endured the consequences of Vichy policies, justification could not erase suffering. The moral calculus was unforgiving, and the trial became a lens through which France examined not only Pétain's decisions, but its own collective responsibility and vulnerability during the darkest years of the war. As the proceedings unfolded, the sentence was pronounced death by firing squad. The nation collectively recoiled, recognizing both the enormity of his crimes and the complexity of his character. Yet, in a gesture that reflected the nuanced intersection of justice and mercy, the sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, acknowledging Pétain's advanced age and previous service. He was confined to the Île Dieu, a remote prison island where the Atlantic winds swept relentlessly, carrying the echoes of history and the isolation of a man now removed from power, admiration, and the society he had once guided. There he spent his final years in reflection, a man physically diminished but forever burdened by the moral weight of his choices. Even in confinement, Pétain remained a figure of fascination, studied and debated by scholars, politicians, and citizens. His story became a cautionary tale about the fragility of heroism, the perilous allure of authority, and the devastating consequences of moral compromise. Monuments to his military victories still stood, yet they existed in tension with the shadow of Vichy France, a duality that challenged historical memory and collective understanding. Debates over Pétain's legacy continue, as historians weigh his valor in the First World War against the moral and political failures of the Second. He became an emblem of the complexity of human character, a figure capable of extraordinary courage and devastating misjudgment within the same lifetime. The consequences of his fall extended beyond individual judgment. France, grappling with collaboration and resistance, used the trial to reaffirm democratic ideals and reestablish moral authority in a society fractured by occupation. The reckoning with Pétain allowed citizens to confront uncomfortable truths about fear, compliance, and survival, fostering a national conversation about responsibility, leadership, and ethical choice under duress. Pétain's legacy, therefore, is inseparable from the lessons it imparts. That heroism is not immune to corruption, that moral compromise can overshadow even the most celebrated achievements, and that history ultimately judges actions as well as intentions. Philippe Pétain died in 1951, physically frail and socially ostracized, a man whose name carried both reverence and condemnation. He left behind a legacy that defies simple categorization, a hero of Verdun, a leader of Vichy, a man whose life embodies the perilous intersection of valor and moral failure. His story serves as a haunting reminder that leadership, in times of crisis, is measured not only by tactical brilliance, but by ethical resolve, and that the decisions of one individual can echo across generations, shaping the destiny of a nation. In remembering Pétain, France remembers both the heights of courage and the depths of compromise, a complex portrait that challenges simplistic notions of heroism and betrayal and invites reflection on the enduring responsibilities of power, conscience, and memory. The story of Philippe Pétain lingers in history, not as a simple tale of heroism or betrayal, but as a reflection of the fragile boundaries between duty, morality, and power. His rise at Verdun demonstrated the extraordinary capacity of one man to inspire courage and resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering. Yet his fall during the occupation revealed how even the most celebrated virtues could be corrupted under pressure and fear. France remembers him both for his triumphs and his failures, a duality that resists easy judgment and challenges collective memory. The paradox of Pétain's life reminds us that heroism is never permanent, that reputation can be fragile, and that choices made in moments of crisis reverberate far beyond the individual, shaping the lives of thousands, even millions. His legacy is a cautionary tale. Strength without moral clarity can become complicity. Loyalty without conscience can become betrayal. and decisions made under duress demand scrutiny and reflection. In examining his life, the nation confronts not only a man, but its own vulnerabilities, hopes, and failures. Philippe Pétain's story endures as a mirror of human complexity, urging us to weigh courage against conscience, leadership against morality, and to recognize that history judges not only deeds, but the character behind them.